Almost every economic indicator related to residential construction seems to be negative, but if you look at the numbers, there's certainly more to the story. Despite significant economic headwinds, our last few builders risk outlooks have been extremely bullish with respect to our outlook for residential small construction as well as small commercial. Ultimately, what we have felt is the demand for housing has been able to hold up against some of the issues that many builders face, such as supply chain management, inflation, rising interest rates, as well as a lack of skilled labor. We still feel that demand is strong enough to overcome a lot of the dismal economic news we've seen over the last 6 to 8 months. We're coming out of 2 negative quarters of GDP growth in the U.S. economy, ultimately making many of the economic headlines more around a recession than some of the other common things contractors have been dealing with. While looking at the impact the recession may have on residential construction, we've really begun to focus on 4 key metrics or 4 key trends around the things we think mean the most to contractors heading into this recessionary period. One is building permits and housing starts. Are they able to hold up to meet that demand we've been speaking about really over the last 20 to 24 months? We're certainly looking at the builder confidence and housing market index as we gauge what the builders really think about what the recession means to them. And then there's a couple other key economic trends that kind of impact the recession and the ability of people to survive through that recession. And that's really what's happening with the median home prices across the country, as well as interest rates with respect to mortgages. Those 4 indicators or those 4 trends will really allow us to kind of put in context some of the negative news that we see out there in today's cycle. In the context of recession, it probably makes a lot of sense to look at these 4 trends and put them more of in a historical context of where we are today coming out of a global pandemic compared to where we were really roughly 6-8 quarters ago going into that global pandemic. And ultimately, building permits and housing starts is a great place to start. Building permits are still well over 1.5 to 1.6 million on an annualized basis, placing us in a very healthy housing market. While single family starts have begun to plummet or fall down to just below 1 million, multifamily seems to be making up that difference by increasing over the last couple months, giving us an idea that that demand for housing is still there. It's just shifting a little bit from that single family entry level maybe to more of a renter's market. Looking at builder confidence and the housing market index kind of tells a different story, and this is what the builders feel primarily about what's going on in their worlds. And the housing market index itself has dipped below 50 for the first time since the global pandemic hit, hovering right around 49, but it's driven primarily from a negative impact of buyer traffic. And that buyer traffic most likely is related to the median home price. It has increased significantly coming out of the pandemic, as well as rising interest rates. So what that buyer traffic means is that's the builder's concept or the builder's judgment of the number of potential people coming through model homes, coming through projects in order to purchase those. So as the confidence in the buyer comes down because of rising prices and interest rates, it makes sense that a contractor would rate that negatively. When we do look at the median home price, however, it has had a significant run-up coming out of the global pandemic, primarily related to mass relocation, a lot of folks changing the way they live, the way they learn, the way they work, where we saw people going from smaller apartments to larger homes. We saw kind of a migration across the country with the work from home, learn from home phenomenon. But as the building market has begun to catch up and inventories have begun to rise, we're now at roughly a 6 to 9 month inventory compared to just 18 months ago, where inventories were roughly in a 3 to 4 month window. You're starting to see home prices begin to come back down, roughly $54,000 last month from a median home price. What this means is builders now have some inventory, they have a little bit less pressure on the completion side of things, and hopefully it will allow contractors to catch up with that crazy demand that we've gone through over the last really 6 to 18 months, as well as allow the supply chain to catch up and some of the other headwind things that we've seen that have really been pushing back on that demand. As far as interest rates go, the Fed has seemed to indicate there may be a slowing in those adjustments going forward with the next Federal Reserve meeting, but ultimately those interest rates are still roughly 5.25 compared to going into that pre-pandemic level. You're talking about $150 a month on a mortgage on what would be a median priced home in the U.S. housing market. While the current economic conditions today can be best described as hectic, looking at these key indicators in a historical context really leads us to believe that contractors may be in better shape than the headlines suggest. It's clear that the demand for housing is still constant. If contractors can see a little bit of relief with respect to interest rates going forward, a small decline in inflation, and ultimately catch up with some of those supply chain issues, we think 2023 could be a great year for contractors going forward. See you next time.